Bank denies elderly black woman her own money. Until a respected man steps in. Everyone in the bank saw what was happening. No one said a word. Then one man stepped forward. It was supposed to be a simple errand. Nothing complicated. Lauren Thompson stepped out of the warm morning sun. She walked into the cool air of Sun Valley Bank in Charlotte, North Carolina. Her purse hung on her arm. She held a small stack of papers. Her account details, ID, and withdrawal slip were neatly organized. This bank had been her trusted place for over 30 years. Every first Monday, like clockwork, she visited. She withdrew cash for bills and groceries. She shared smiles with the tellers. Today should have been no different. The bank lobby was quiet. Soft beeps came from card readers. Feet shuffled on the polished floor. Tellers worked behind the counter. A few customers waited in line. An older man in a gray suit sat in a corner, filling out a form. It was a typical Monday morning. Until it wasn't. Lauren moved forward in line. Her shoes tapped lightly on the floor. Her mind wandered as she waited. She thought about her granddaughter promising to fix a loose chair in her dining room. She remembered how hot it was outside, even before noon. She wondered if she had enough flour to bake biscuits later. Then it was her turn. She stepped up to the counter. She smiled warmly at the young teller. His name tag read Ethan. He looked about 25, with tired eyes. He seemed impatient, like he didn't want to be there. "Good morning," Lauren said kindly. She slid her withdrawal slip and ID toward him. "I'd like to take out $800 from my account, please." Ethan took the papers. But he didn't follow the usual routine. He didn't type into the computer or count out cash. Instead, he frowned. He studied her ID too long. He flipped it over, back and forth, like something was wrong. "This is a large withdrawal," he mumbled. "I need to check something." Lauren's smile faded slightly. Large? $800 wasn't large. Not for someone who had banked here longer than Ethan had been alive. But she stayed calm. "Of course, dear," she said. "Take your time." Ethan typed on his computer. His eyes narrowed at the screen. Then, without looking at her, he spoke again. "I'll need more verification before I can process this." Lauren blinked. "Excuse me?" "You need to show another form of ID," Ethan said flatly. Lauren frowned. This had never happened before. Not once in 30 years. "I have my driver's license right there," she said, pointing to the card. Ethan sighed, like she was being difficult. "Yes, but we need extra ID for withdrawals over a certain amount." Lauren felt something shift inside her. It was small but real. "Since when?" she asked. Ethan didn't answer. He turned to another teller, whispered something, then looked back at the screen. He ignored her question completely. Lauren glanced behind her. The line had grown. A few people were watching now. Some were subtle, others obvious. She felt a warmth rising, but not from the North Carolina heat. She took a deep breath. Her voice stayed steady. "Young man, I've been banking here since before you were born. I've never needed extra ID before. What's the problem?" Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. "I need to call a manager," he said quickly. Then he stood and walked away. Something felt wrong. But this was only the start. Lauren exhaled slowly. She tried not to look around. She could feel eyes on her. People were watching, judging. The air in the bank felt heavier, like the room had warmed up. She glanced at the counter. Her ID sat there, with her name and picture. It was the same ID she'd used for years. But today, it wasn't enough. A few feet away, Ethan stood with a woman in a stiff blue jacket. She was the bank manager. They spoke quietly, but Lauren saw their quick glances at her. Her fingers tightened on her purse strap. She thought about a friend, Miss Clara, who faced something similar last year. Clara had gone to buy a new stove. The salesman ignored her, helping others first. He questioned if she could afford it. Clara left humiliated, driving across town to shop somewhere else. Lauren had shaken her head then, thinking, that won't happen to me. And yet, here she was. Ethan returned first, avoiding her eyes. The manager followed, standing tall with her arms crossed. She looked at Lauren like she'd been interrupted from something important. "Ma'am," the manager began, her voice sharp and professional. "We have to be careful about fraudulent activity. Do you have another form of ID?" Lauren tilted her head. "Fraudulent activity?" "Yes," the manager said, sounding annoyed. "We have policies to prevent unauthorized withdrawals. For an amount like this, we need to confirm." Lauren kept her voice calm. "An amount like what?" $800, she said. "That's a problem now?" The manager blinked, caught off guard for a moment. Then she recovered. "It's a security measure," she said smoothly. "For your protection." Lauren let those words linger. "For your protection." They were meant to sound comforting. But they felt like an excuse. She thought about all the times she'd walked into this bank. She'd chatted with tellers, smiled at managers. Never once had she felt out of place. Until today. Lauren sighed and reached into her purse. She pulled out a small card. "Here," she said, handing over her Medicare ID. "Will this work?" The manager took it, barely looking at it. She shook her head. "We need a secondary government-issued ID." Lauren's patience wore thin. "My driver's license is right there," she said. "It has my name, my picture, my address. It's the same signature I've used here for 30 years. The manager didn't budge. "I understand, ma'am, but it's policy," she repeated. Her tone was like she was talking to a child. Lauren's jaw tightened. "If it's policy," she said, pointing to the next customer. "Did you ask him for 2 IDs?" The customer was a middle-aged man in a polo shirt and jeans. He looked up from his phone, startled. Everyone knew he hadn't been asked for extra ID. No one said a word. Lauren's heart beat faster. She'd spent her life noticing moments like this. Moments where you could stay quiet or push back. She hated making a scene. She never had. But today, something made her stand firm. She straightened her shoulders. She looked the manager in the eye. "I'd like to speak to someone else," she said. The manager gave a tight smile. "I'm the supervisor." "Then get me someone above you," Lauren said. The manager hesitated. Her eyes flicked to Ethan, who suddenly studied his keyboard. For a long moment, no one spoke. The room felt too still. Then a voice broke the silence. "Is there a problem here?" The voice was deep, steady, commanding. Every head turned toward the entrance. That's when everything changed. The voice came from a man near the door. He stood tall in a sharp black suit. His presence seemed to shift the room's energy. The manager turned, forcing a polite smile. Lauren recognized him instantly. James Carter. He wasn't just a customer. He was a well-known businessman in Charlotte. A former city official, respected by many. His influence reached far beyond this bank. Lauren had seen him on TV, speaking at events, opening new businesses. She'd met him once, years ago, At a community fundraiser. Now, here he was, staring down the manager. The manager hesitated. "No problem, Mr. Carter," she said carefully. "We're just following protocol." "Protocol?" James stepped forward. His shoes clicked on the floor. He looked at Lauren, then back at the manager. "Would you mind explaining what that means here?" The manager squared her shoulders. "We have security measures for certain withdrawals. We're requesting additional ID." "For $800? James asked, his voice calm but firm. The manager's lips parted. She hadn't expected to be challenged like this. Not in front of everyone. Lauren felt the room's energy shift. Customers were listening now. Some pretended not to, glancing at their phones. Others watched openly. The man in the polo shirt shifted awkwardly. A woman in a yellow dress by the ATM looked over. Then nudged her friend. Even Ethan seemed to shrink behind his counter. James kept his eyes on the manager. "Tell me something," he said, his voice steady. "How long has Mrs. Thompson been banking here?" The manager hesitated. Lauren answered for her. 30 years. James nodded. "And in those 30 years, how many times have you questioned her withdrawals like this?" Silence. The manager's jaw tightened. Her hands clasped in front of her. "Mr. Carter, with all due respect." "This isn't about respect," James cut in. "This is about whether your policy is actually a policy. Or if it's just being applied to certain people." His words hit hard. A murmur rippled through the room. Someone in the back coughed. The security guard by the door looked uncomfortable. The manager inhaled, her face blank. "As I said, we're trying to prevent fraud." James shook his head slightly. "Fraud," he repeated. He turned to Lauren. "Mrs. Thompson, have you ever committed fraud?" Lauren gave a small, dry laugh. "Not once in 76 years." Her voice carried a quiet strength. James turned back to the manager. "And yet she's the one being treated like a suspect. In front of everyone." Lauren felt a mix of emotions. Relief, maybe. Or something close to vindication. She'd spent her life handling situations like this carefully. But James didn't need to be careful. His presence made the bank rethink everything. The manager let out a slow breath. Before she could finish, an older man in a suit stepped forward. He was the branch director. "That's enough," he said firmly. He looked at the manager. "Process the withdrawal." The manager stiffened but nodded. She swallowed whatever she wanted to say. She turned to Ethan. "Go ahead." Ethan's fingers flew across the keyboard. His earlier hesitation was gone. Lauren watched as he counted out her cash. The bills she'd been entitled to all along. But the damage was done. She glanced around. She saw the faces of those who had watched. The ones who had stayed silent. The ones who looked away when it got tense. The ones who would have let this happen if James hadn't stepped in. That hurt the most. She'd spent her life being careful. Dressing neatly, speaking politely, avoiding trouble. And still, here she was. Ethan slid the cash toward her. Lauren took it without a word. She didn't say thank you. This wasn't a favor. But she wasn't done yet. Lauren tucked the cash into her purse. Her hands were steady, her face calm. But inside, she felt a storm. She turned to James Carter. He'd spoken up when no one else did. His expression was firm but kind. There was disappointment in his eyes. Not for her, but for what had happened. The manager, still tense, cleared her throat. "Mrs. Thompson, we appreciate your patience." Lauren's eyes met hers. Do you? The manager froze. Lauren adjusted her purse. Because it felt like you thought I was stealing my own money. A murmur spread through the bank. The tension didn't fade, it changed. The manager opened her mouth, searching for words. Something to make this go away. James folded his arms. I'd like to know something, he said. Would you have asked me for 2 IDs for the same withdrawal? The manager didn't answer. The silence stretched. You and I both know the answer, James said. And that's the problem. His words landed heavily. A woman in line looked down at her phone. The man in the polo shirt coughed and shifted. The security guard avoided eye contact. The branch director spoke again. This was a mistake, he said carefully. Mrs. Thompson, I'm truly sorry for how this was handled. Lauren studied him. She let his words hang there. Then she asked the question burning inside her. How often does this happen to people like me? When no one's around to speak up. The director's face stayed calm. But his pause said enough. James let out a quiet breath. More often than they'll admit, he said. Lauren nodded. She gripped her purse tighter. She had her money. She had their apology. But something still felt heavy. She wasn't the only one who'd faced this. And she wouldn't be the last. As she turned to leave, James stepped beside her. Let me walk you out, he said softly. Lauren gave a small nod. She was grateful, but not finished. Lauren walked toward the exit. James stayed by her side. At the door, she stopped. Something inside her wouldn't let this end. She turned back. The bank was too quiet now. Customers who had been impatient before were frozen. They pretended not to listen but couldn't look away. The manager stood behind the counter, looking relieved. She thought this was over. Lauren wouldn't let it be. She straightened her back. She adjusted the scarf around her neck. She spoke, not just to the manager, but to everyone. I've lived 76 years, she said. I learned long ago how people like me are treated. When they think no one's watching. No one moved. But today, you got caught. The manager tensed. James watched quietly, letting her speak. Lauren took a step forward. Her voice was clear, steady. I know what this was. You know what this was. And I need you to understand something. People remember when they're treated like they don't belong. Her words settled over the room. Some people shifted, uncomfortable. A young teller, not Ethan, looked down at her hands. The branch director cleared his throat. Mrs. Thompson, again, I'm so sorry. I don't want your apology, Lauren said. I want to know what you're going to do about this. Silence. The director hesitated. We'll review our policies, he said finally. Lauren held his gaze. Make sure you do. She turned to James. He gave her a small, respectful nod. Together, they walked out into the Charlotte sunlight. The weight of the moment stayed with her. But so did her strength. She'd spoken up. And she'd been heard.